Claire, what would you like to say?
I'd like to say I'm in a situation where I'm actually been quite lucky. My dad has a farm. He inherited from his father. It's been in the family for about 1,000 years. I don't work the farm.
Whoa, slow down. 1,000 years?
Yeah, about 1,000 years.
That's fantastic.
Looking up,
is it in the Doomsday Book? Is it in the Doomsday Book?
I don't know if it's in the Doomsday. It's something about 1192, where I think Penrith was quite a cosmopolitan place in those days.
Yes.
Yeah, there were Flemish and there were Swedish. There was John Thomasson, must have been a Viking or something. But anyway, they were all around in those days. But the thing is, for me, and it's been in my father's family for obviously a long time. His father was a vicar. He lived up there, but he didn't farm the land. But obviously his whole family were involved in it, so he kept the land. My dad inherited it. My dad's he's in his late 90s now.
Okay.
So he's left it as a package to his children. Now, I'm in a situation, I don't farm the land. I'm just looking at it as a bonus. So for me, I'm perfectly happy to pay tax on that. I have a sentimental attachment to the land because it's been the family for ages. It's a historical thing. However, the farmers who farm that land, we know them very well. The one guy, he's got his own farm and he uses the land as an extension for cows and sheep and all the rest of it. And he works all hours God sent. He really does. He has a relationship with that land that is incredible. He knows every single thing about it.
Yes.
But also, one thing that I realised about 5 years ago when my dad suddenly realised that he might be mortal and we should go and meet the farm, is when we talked to him about extending the lease, he was talking about 10 years.
Yeah.
So we were like, that's quite a long time. He said, yeah, but what I put into it now, we're looking at a repayment structure about 10 to 20 years. So what I suddenly realised is their timescale is so different to somebody working in the town. And so my sort of, if I was going to talk to Rachel Reeves, I'd say to her, look, for people who are actually working their farms, keep the break. For those that inherit, it's a bonus. They've got sentimental attachment, but they're not actually doing the hard work. Then I'm quite happy. Well, I say happy. I'm prepared to pay the tax. I don't think I deserve it. You're
sounding like a Marxist now, Claire. Although, speaking of Marxists, Steve's been in touch. And you'll like this. So this lady's ancestor stole some land 1,000 years ago, and now they're complaining about paying tax on it. She's actually welcoming the opportunity to pay tax on it, Steve, although she might dispute the idea that, what was it, Sam Thomason?
They got rewarded.
That Mr. Thomason, the Viking, the marauding Viking who stole the Peak District, the Lake District land that you refer to. It's probably a bit late to relitigate that. But why would there not be a requirement to pay some inheritance tax, even if you were farming it, given that you would get a much better deal than almost anybody else in a similar space?
Because I think the amount of effort they're putting into the land, it's there for generations to come.
Okay, how much effort do we think James Dyson is putting into the land? And he's the biggest agricultural landowner in the country.
Okay, I don't. From what I can gather, he's putting in a far more effort than I am, sitting in London. If he's setting, I don't know. I read something about he's setting up businesses, or he's doing things with his land. I am setting up businesses in London, but it's
you've got a business that's already set up in the Lake District. I understand the distinction that you're making, and when I say it's more emotional than intellectual, that's not actually a criticism, because there's room for emotion in this conversation. That's why I used the word romance earlier to describe one of the farmers that called me yesterday. But if you see it as a choice between people who are asset rich and cash poor and people that are asset poor and cash poor, you're going to struggle to justify going after the latter rather than the former.
But I honestly, the amount of work and effort, just sheer physical work.
Lots of people listening to this programme work incredibly hard and don't have assets worth £4 million. And they need the NHS, and they need the schools to be run, and they need a bigger army, and they need a better criminal justice system.
That's
and they need...
But the farmers are
there you cut me off in
land.
my prime.
Sorry.
That's outrageous. I was just lining up for a rant. They do, I know. And that's exactly what this phone-in is about. The sense that there is some special pleading. There is some special case, but I think that I'd probably meet that sense by saying, okay, you take half of what everybody else has to do.
Mm.
Half.
I
Half.
would give them the benefit. I
Half
really
with a
would.
7-year taper. Also, pass it on now and you pay nothing. I know I don't want to bring the prospect of your dad's mortality back into the conversation, but there'd be nothing due if he'd got his affairs in order a little earlier.
Well, he didn't think he had to, did he? Because it's been sprung upon everybody.
That's very
the
true.
other thing. There's no conversation. I think this is the problem with this government. There's no conversation before they suddenly do these actions.
I think they'd love to have more. I think they'd love to have more conversation. But if you have a look at the concerns of the mass market media and the influence that it's also had on the BBC, they wouldn't be allowed to have a conversation. And Keir Starmer turned up to talk about this a month ago. Everyone would have been asking him about his spectacles and his football tickets. That's part of the problem, although that's a conversation for a different day. If Rachel Reeves turned up to talk about it today, everyone would be talking to her about whether she worked in retail banking or on the economic analysis desk in an old job on her CV. No one would actually be asking her questions about the detail and the facts of this. They'd probably be asking her about the clothes she got off Wahid Ali, if indeed she did. There's a similar, isn't there? The people living, pensioners on their own in massive houses who say they can't afford the winter fuel allowance. It's quite similar. And I don't know quite where this idea comes from, that we should all be defending them instead of encouraging them to recalibrate, to move, or to rethink the relationship between assets and income. Because I like this parallel from Isaac. Austerity was about balancing the books on the backs of those least able to bear it. This feels more like the kind of wealth tax that is a less, in my view, inequitable way of proceeding. I like your phrase, cautiously welcome this policy. That is exactly where I am on this. Let me go a little further. So by describing themselves as asset rich but cash poor, and therefore somehow deserving of protection from revenue-raising policies, farmers push the onus back to people who are asset-rich, who are asset-poor and cash-poor. So where are you going to go? If it was a straight choice between asset-rich and cash-poor and asset-poor and cash-poor, where is the more deserving target of raising money to defend the national interest? It's an interesting one. Francis is in Lewis. Francis, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. How are you?
Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
I feel there's a point that's actually being missed in the whole discussion about inheritance tax.
Yeah.
I think if we look at the broader history post World War II with the subsidies that farmers received from the government, the initial idea was to keep the price of food down for the general public. The subsidies haven't as such increased massively, but the cost to produce the food has for farmers. It's very tricky to stay competitive with, the food that's produced to a lower standard across the world.
You've done it, haven't you? You've done it straight up. You've raised the Brexit spectre.
Oh.
So when people like Rees-Mogg were talking about bringing in chlorinated chicken and signing deals with Australia that let Australian beef farmers ride roughshod over our farmers, I was foursquare behind our farmers, even as they called me James O-Brexit and voted to impose these sanctions on themselves. I understood the situation better than they did. The problem now is the consequences in many ways of their own actions.
It is, yeah. The one thing that I think of when people say it's the Brexit argument is look at what's happened to the farmers that are still in the EU, in Ireland and in the Netherlands and Belgium and France and Germany, with all the regulations that they're now having to face as well.
Which they're very cross about, which is why protectionism in the context of food supply is a very good thing.
Yeah.
But what's the thing we're missing? So you mean the relationship between the cost of producing food and over the generation, so and the reduction in subsidies. So it's costing more and more to produce food. You're getting paid less and less for it. And therefore,
correct.
this do you understand how anomalous it is to someone living in a 300 grand house with a 150 grand mortgage that you have got people with estates in excess of £3 million pleading poverty on the income front. You must see how weird that sounds, even if it's true.
It is weird, yeah. Well, I'm a farmer myself, so I experience it firsthand.
Yes.
Really, I have previous experience of estates worth millions claiming poverty as such, which is...
This is where I think the government is getting it a bit wrong. And part of the reason for that is because I don't think they care about the noise. I think they care about farmers, although a lot of farmers would dispute that at the moment. But they don't. They think the numbers defend the policy. But, of course, the placards, the slogans and the Jeremy Clarkson fans out there aren't interested in crunching the numbers. But Clarkson and Dyson and people like that seem to me to be the real targets of this policy. People who have publicly stated prior to this morning, that the only reason they've invested in farmland, or one of the main reasons why they've invested in farmland, is to avoid inheritance tax. And that drives up the cost of land for everybody. So take away the perk, or take away half of the perk, and it could be good news for farmers like you.
This is where I get torn personally.
Yes, well, you're right to be torn.
Yeah, no, it's a tricky one. I think what the government did initially is where they're targeting the right people, but I don't think they've got the threshold correct. That's my personal opinion. But
yeah, maybe. But then again, there's a lot of confusion surrounding the thresholds. And of course, if you owned your farm, I don't think you do own your farm, do you?
I don't know.
No, but if you did and you were worried about having to pay tax, your heirs having to pay tax on it, all you have to do is pass it on to them today and then stay alive for another 7 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. We can laugh, but it is actually that simple. Every single farmer, I mean, it may be that you don't trust your kids. It may be you're worried if you pass the farm on to your children now, they're going to sling you out and you'll be relying on the state. You'll be listening to presenters on LBC describing you as a scrounging, worthless layabout because your children have thrown you out of the house and you've got nowhere else to go. But that is the option. Every single farmer protesting today with heirs can avoid all inheritance tax by simply passing it on today and staying alive for another 7 years. Again, that seems to me to be missing from much of the debate, which makes me think it is another example of wealth using all of its power to persuade non-wealth, to persuade ordinary people to use their political energy to defend wealth.
Hello, Tina.
Hello, Sheila. I don't have any sympathy with the farmers. I grew up in an agricultural area in Warwickshire. I'm afraid I concur with the old English folk song, the chorus of which is, I never saw a farmer on a bike. Before somebody says that's the thingy of envy, what is it they always say? Politics of envy. It's a fact that most, if not all, of the farmers on it send their children to be educated privately, so they're in the top 7% of the country. And when we're in the state we're in at the moment, I have no hesitation in backing the government in trying to get some more money out of people who have a lot of it in order to help those of us who do not have as much.
I think we need to be careful of assuming every farmer is the same, don't we? And assuming that everybody...
I didn't say that. No. The government have made provision. They have said that it will fall upon the shoulders of those who are rich, not the ones that aren't. I know there are poor farmers. I'm not an idiot. But I'm
not suggesting you're an idiot for a second, Tina.
No, but I'm just saying that I am not. I do read and I do research, and I know that there are poor farmers, and I'm as sorry for them as I am for poor people of any kind. I'm prepared to pay more tax from what I get, and it's nothing like what most farmers earn, and certainly not of the level that the farmers who will end up having to pay what we all pay, apart from farmers, inheritance tax.
Do you accept that the value of a farm might not, for years, for the entire life of the farmer maybe, be reflected in the... Oh, no, you don't want to hear that? Be reflected...
No, sorry, I was just blowing my nose. I beg your pardon.
I thought you were sighing in an exasperated way, but no, you were just
no. I just had a
okay. Needs must. That the value of the property might not reflect the income that it generates year on year. That what they're doing is sustaining a farm and taking a small salary.
Well, yes. No, I know that, but I still feel that the richest farmers are getting a lot of money, not like the poorer ones who aren't going to be affected by this. If you can afford to send your children to decent public, never mind private schools, you're not feeling the pinch, are you? If you're wearing a Barber jacket and you've taken a day off work to go and troll around London, you are not hard pressed. In the village I lived in, I lived cheek by jowl with the people who were being exploited by the farmers, namely the labourers. And as soon as they could find a way of not having to employ people, they went straight for it.
Well, I'll listen to farmers themselves about how hard pressed they are or not, rather than assume that all of them aren't, and therefore can afford to come to London for a day off. It might not be as clear cut as that. But thank you very much, Tina. Tina in Haddenham. Andrew's called from Springfield in Oregon. Hello, Andrew.
Hi there, Sheila. I'm with Tina there. I think she had a lot of good points.
Just don't blow your nose, Andrew.
No, I won't. But I've for years now I've heard. I mean, they took the benefits when it was part of the EU and there was a bunch of grants and stuff. They've campaigned against the European Union. Farmers were hugely responsible for pulling us out of Brexit. I mean, for Brexit rather, pulling us out of Europe. There are consequences. No one else gets to inherit this at the same rates. A lot of those farms have been buying up other farms.
But this decision isn't.
The big
this
farms.
decision isn't particularly a consequence of Brexit, is it? Or do you see it as being that?
Well, the country's bankrupt and they've got to get some money together, and that's pretty much because of Brexit.
Not only.
As far as I can see. I can't see anything else that devalued the pound by, what was it, nearly 190 a pound on the dollar. Now it's 120. I mean, that's...
So your attitude is you make bed, you lie in it.
There's a certain amount of that, 100%. And this issue about 1 million, it's 3 million. Apparently, it's 3 million once you add in all the other stuff. So they're looking at one side and they're saying, oh, well, we're only allowed to make 1 million, then we're going to get taxed. It's like, well, no, but it works out as 3 million. It sounds really appalling at 1 million because even I can understand that that's basically just the land, maybe one tractor. But start getting up to 3 million, I'm thinking, well, you've got your tractor covered now. What? I don't really get why the rest of the country is being asked to pay. They're going to have to pay for all of the making up the shortfall that's there thanks to Brexit. Everyone else has to pay. So why is it these farmers always think that they're exempt? Because it's the same thing happened in France. It happened in America. You got all these farmers running out. They're all being inspired by right-wing groups.
Well, I was going to ask you about America. What's the deal there?
Well, here, I mean, if you can get farming exemptions on your tax. Well, probably we'll have no inheritance tax with Donald Trump in or something like that. But, the whole country will run without anyone being taxed according to some, I don't know how that works. Oh, we're going to get rid of all the inspectors and everything, so there is no one to pay, so you don't need any tax. But in England at the moment, you've got this, you had the yellow jackets in France, and I heard those people, I'm like, really? Are you just another form of far-right extremism being promoted as a populist idea, even though you're actually a minority?
And what did you conclude?
They seem to be promoted by the right wing. The same thing happens pretty much everywhere nowadays. We jump onto these.
That doesn't necessarily mean you're
nations.
Extremist because you're right wing, does it?
No, because a lot of people. I mean, there are a fair number of people that might end up there through a misguided concern, shall I say?
Well, that's true of the left wing.
It is true of the left wing, but last I checked, the left wing haven't really been amassing power and actually doing anything dangerous with the power for years. I mean, we had in America, we had, on a side topic, we had 4 years of everyone talking about Antifa, who were basically people that opposed Donald Trump exporting or deporting people. And
but whether the left, I'm talking about America now, whether you think the left has been doing dangerous things or not depends on your view of some of the things that they espouse, doesn't it? That you perhaps would be relaxed about, other people would not be relaxed about, and might regard it as dangerous or extreme. That's the beauty, I suppose, of politics. Thanks, Andrew, for your call.